Dun 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 dun. The Hoofwich Horror Part 2. As I awoke groggily, I wondered how long I had been out. It was dark now, the sky blackened with smoke in the late hour of Celestia's day, and the air thick with a mix of acrid scents and the mists of an eerie fog. I was in a metal cage on wheels, and I was being dragged by several ponies on all fours. Their bodies. By Celestia, Luna, I can't even begin to describe how misshapen their bodies were. All their hair was gone, and some weird pale peach-like color covered their bodies. Not a one of them had a cutie mark. Instead, there was scar tissue where they should be. The cart neared the town, and I looked up to see us begin to pass under an archway made of bones. Everything was true. My rational side could no longer hide from what was happening right before my eyes. The villagers all came up, cheering as I was dragged into town. Their bodies. If the ones pulling me were frightening, their bodies were more so. They walked on their hind hooves, and the mares had strange mounds of flesh on their chests. Their forehooves had been... Oh, I get it. Strange mounds of flesh. The mares. They got the boobs, man. The titties. Their forehooves had been shaped and deformed, allowing them to grip and hold things. I saw them in the village, some with no fur, and some with. Their bodies twisted in ways that I cannot even begin to describe. I was surrounded by their evil, and yet they all seemed so happy to see me. I feared the worst as I was dragged by the hairless ponies towards the building in the center of town. As we neared the center, I saw the fire pit I had read about. Its blaze, still as strong as ponies, zebras, and rats, danced about it in a mad frenzy. The acrid scent of burning flesh filled the air as I noticed the grate over the fires. Luna, they were leaping willingly into the grate! I watched as they willingly leapt forward and stayed there, the fire and heat bubbling and burning their flesh until they succumbed to the pain and smoke to die. But the greatest horror was the fact that they were creatures with long, hooked poles. I couldn't believe it. They were cooking them! They cooked them on that grate of sacrifice, and then pulled them off. For the time I was kept there, I watched them pull off the blackened bodies, carve them with jagged knives, and give the parts to villagers who start to feast. By Celestia, they were cannibals. Was this to my fate? Was I going to become their evening feast? Several of the male creatures in gaudy gold robes and necklaces came to the gate, pointing strange metal sticks at me as they sneered in anger and distrust at my very being. The Hoofwich... Oh. One of the robe figure turned... let's see. Creepy cultist man.
The Hoofwich has decreed you are to see her.
One of the robed figures then turned, aiming his stick at the crowd, and did... I don't know what, but a loud explosion mixed with the scent of burning sulfur was followed by half a rat's head being shredded into nothingness. The stick was pointed back at me, and I felt sickened that the example of the rat was when dragged towards the sacrifice pit to be cooked. Knowing full well what would happen if I tried to bolt, I slowly walked out of my cage, and it was opened and began to follow them across the plaza towards the regal-looking house on the opposite side of the plaza. Leading me inside as the door opened, they kept those odd metal sticks aimed at me at all times. After leading me into a foyer of sorts, they shuffled back out and closed the door, sealing it with a lock. I looked about. Seeing the paintings on the wall filled me with a shudder of terror. While most homes would have paintings of loved ones, these dark paintings of oil detailed the history of the town. In all of them was a small creature with the same pale peach complexion as those that pulled my cart. Its visage was twisted and marred in such a way I cannot describe. It was unlike anything in my books, its muzzle non-existent, and having almost a half beak above its mouth, and its ears were on the side of its head, not on the top like the creatures of Equestria. As I walked along the hallway, I suddenly heard a voice from inside my head. Twilight Sparkle. It was an old voice, ancient almost, and masculine. I looked about before hearing in my head again. Twilight, do not react. Just pretend to be looking at the paintings. I looked at a disgusting painting of the ponies diving into a flame pit as I thought. Who are you? The voice chuckled in my head. An old ancestor of Spike's? He was named for me, you know. But I am in so much pain. They bleed me daily for their damned youth and longevity. But being kept on the border between life and death, I have been able to watch Equestria grow. I've seen many things, and I now need you to do the greatest and bravest thing you've ever done. Even braver than stopping Nightmare Moon. I gasped involuntarily, then trotted to look at the next painting. A mare whose body had been twisted and malformed to look like the strange foreign creature I saw in the other paintings. What? You mean you saw that? I thought, and I heard the male voice chuckle. Twilight, you have much to learn about the Elder Dragons. Our powers are great, but I'm kept too weak to stop this evil. Only you can stop it. You have the power Molly craves and yet fears. She wants to take your power, but you can use it to defeat her. I shook my head, laying down and covering my eyes with my hooves. I cannot! This is too much for me! And the old male voice soothingly whispered into my mind. You can do it. You have the magic to end this all and escape. But you must be brave. If you'll give in, they'll have enough power to overcome the zebra's wards and flood out into all of Equestria. You are the only one who can finish this, but you must be willing to kill. Raising up, I nodded as I thought to the voice. Tell me what I must do. As the voice began to tell me its plan, I listened. A door opened at the end of the hallway, and a cloaked figure motioned me before holding one of those metal sticks. Trotting into the next room, I was aghast at what I saw. The walls, the floor, everything was covered in splatters of blood. Some ancient, and some seeming as fresh as if it was just spilled upon the ground. The figures in here were even more deformed as the villagers, some nearly identical to the one they worshipped except for the tail and animal ears. Most horrible of all, they were performing some of the most perverted acts to one another. Not just sexual acts, but violence and cruelty towards those who did not survive whether twisted changes they had performed to their bodies. In the corner, they even slit the wrist of some poor zebra on all fours, drinking his blood as they laughed at his gasps of death. Seeing me finally, the roar of their laughter and cheering as I trotted forward was deafening. As I neared the center of the room, a childlike female voice shouted into the air, "Silence!" That was a childlike female shout. Deal with it. The noise ended abruptly, and I looked about. The creatures paused in their celebrations. The feasting on their own and their rotting in the blood and guts and eyes all looked towards the front of the room. There, on a dais, sat the small creature that had been in the first paintings. It looked so innocent, and yet frightening at the same time. I cannot begin to describe the twisted, dark features on this insane creature. The things I remember most of this dark parody of life itself is she wore a red dress and held what looked to be a cooked leg of some poor rat that she was eating. Setting down the leg, she let out one of the most evil of giggles. It was like hearing you, when you were Nightmare Moon, giggling, and chilled my soul and chilled me to my soul as I swallowed to wet my throat to talk.
"Oh, goody, goody,"
she said as she hopped up to the throne.
"A unicorn, and a powerful one at that. You know, we had to kill all the ones of your kind long ago. Making the horn necklaces, they let us go into the forest, they let us hunt, but with your power, we can finally leave and go get fresh converts. Then all will know the blessings I, the Hoofwich, can give."
I remembered the dragon's words in my head and braced my hooves on the slick stone floor. And did you bless your brother and sister the same way, Molly? Her smile faded, an insane and angry look crossing her misshapen face as she sneered at me. What do you know of that? She looked around, tears suddenly filling her eyes. Megan,
Megan didn't understand. Neither did Danny. Megan had to die. She would never let me claim our right to rule. She wanted to be friends.
This twisted, almost hairless creature pulling on her long blonde mane before turning its angry eyes upon me once more.
I am the Hoofwich. My reign is eternal. My blessings have made those that can take the change beautiful, and those who can't into workers and food. Who are you to question my work?
I let out a laugh, trying to put on a face of bravery despite my very real fear inside my soul. I swallowed before letting out another laugh. Is that why you killed them, Molly? First your sister, and then your brother? She stomped her twisted hindhoof as she screamed.
I am not Molly. I am the Hoofwich. The Hoofwich!
She paced around, still pulling at her mane while she looked at the ceiling.
They didn't have power. Molly couldn't survive. She could never be strong enough, but the Hoofwich could. She was able to push Megan into the ravine, watching until Megan's sister's screams ended with that sickening, crunching splat. And Danny, he wanted to protect the ponies. They are mine, by right to do with as I wish.
She swirled on me, the insane look filling her eyes again as she dropped to the floor.
Look, I made them beautiful. I made them look like me. They're my little ponies. My pretty toys. Mine, you pitiful unicorn. My toys.
And then, in a softer, scared voice, she whimpered as she looked to the back of the room.
I never wanted this. I wanted to go home. Home to Mommy and Daddy, but Megan controlled the rainbow. And Megan died. I just wanted to go home. This wasn't paradise. It was hell.
The dragon was right. Despite all this power, all these followers, this twisted creature was still a child in its mind. It was right. I could do this. I was winning. All I had to do was keep all attention on us as I let my horn begin to glow. On either side of the creature, I picked up 2 flickering oil lanterns as I taunted her again. You're not the Hoofwich. You're a scared little girl in over her head. You played at being a goddess and failed. I've met real goddesses. I've even defeated an evil goddess who is now my partner. You are nothing like them. She pounded her front appendages on the floor. Its shape I still can't describe without falling into insanity. Crawling to her throne, she reached to the left and pulled out one of those long metal sticks. Still on her knees, she pointed it at me while trembling in a mixture of fear and rage. Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Be quiet! I rule here! I am the prettiest goddess! This is my kingdom! I am the Hoofwich! Bow to me! I held the lanterns above her now in the air with my magic, closing my eyes as I said quietly, You are a false goddess. A creature not of this world. And I am going to cleanse the world of you the same way you get rid of anything you fear or detest. With fire! I stopped holding the lanterns with my magic, and opening my eyes I saw the glass fall to the floor. As the twin lamps exploded on the floor, the oil splashed across the girl's dress as the fire licked up her dress and lower body. She dropped the metal stick as all the room came to life at once, the air filled with her screams, the creature trying to bat at the flames, and those surrounding the hall tried to find water to put out the blaze. Looking about, I used my magic to make the remaining oil lamps on the walls fall to the floor. Hitting the blood-soaked floors, the flames kindled awake far quicker than normal, and soon, all the walls and most of the misshapen creatures were covered by the flames. The cries and screams of the twisted creatures deafened my ears as I turned, seeing that the flame-covered Hoofwich had picked up the stick again, pointing at me as the fires boiled her body. The end exploded, and I smelled sulfur before closing my eyes. But then, I heard nothing. I opened my eyes, and I was outside of the house as the mist partially hid me from view. Somehow, my teleporting ability had kicked in to transport me to safety. Closing my eyes for a moment to swallow the pain, I nodded sagely as I decided at that moment to finish this. I could not be followed. I had to end this. I began to bolt from house to house, knocking down the oil lamps in each house as the flames began to awaken and paint the walls with cleansing death. The village began to notice too late. All these twisted monstrosities began to try and put out the flames with no chance of succeeding by this point. The heat and choking smoke was nearly unbearable as I dodged and weaved in a panicked crowd. Reaching the gates, I gave the bone arch a kick to send it to the ground with a rattle, the bones shattering from their age. I started to run, my hooves taking me quickly as I could gallop up the hill. Reaching the top of the hill, I turned, falling down in relief as no one was following me and the village was drowned in flames. Closing my eyes, I fell into a sleep, in a fit of exhaustion as I closed my eyes. In my head, as I fell asleep, I could hear the old male's voice last words. "Thank you. Now I can finally rest." I awoke slowly, letting out a low groan. Looking around, I noticed that I was inside of Zecora's hut. Letting out another groan, I rolled to my side as she entered the room. "I am glad you are awake. Not much more sleep could your body take." I struggled to stand, wincing at the ache over my body as I saw I was covered in bandages. What happened to me?" She took her head, resting near me as she laid a warm cloth over my brow. "Asleep for 5 days you have been, and your battle defeating my people's hidden sin." I sat up, the cloth falling to the bed as I gasped. "So, the creature, the village, it wasn't just a dream? All that pain and death really happened?" She just nodded as I broke down in tears. The death and pain of the village and the horrors I had witnessed pouring out in a seemingly never-ending sob. Zecora didn't say anything. She just held me close in a hug and let me cry. Eventually, as my sobs subsided, she helped me up and back to Ponyville, back to my home, my friends, my dear friends who met us on the outskirts of the forest, worried if I was okay. We told them I had fallen to a gully, and Zecora had nursed me well enough to be able to walk home. I was helped to my library, and Spike was there to help me into my bed. I kept to my story, so they didn't worry. They didn't need to know about the horrors and the twisted, deformed creatures I'd faced and burned. But as I laid there, Celestia's sun setting and your moon rising, I started to think about everything. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that horrible girl's face. The rest of the village may be dead. The dragon may be dead, but that creature couldn't be dead. I could still feel its magic, its hatred. It was hurt, and its followers were dead. But the magic of its potion and dragon blood kept it still alive. And so, I began to write you. Dear Luna, Celestia doesn't have your darkness. She's my mentor and teacher. But she is too obsessed with the light. She doesn't have our darkness. She doesn't have the will to finish it. I plead you, my princess and beloved. Please, do something to ensure this evil never leaves that burned earth. Make sure that no other pony sees what makes it so I'll not be able to sleep peacefully for years to come. Yours always, Twilight Sparkle.
Dearest Twilight Sparkle, the Weather Pegasi had been looking for a testing ground for some of their most dangerous of weather conditions. Using my pull, I decreed that the clearing you told me of will be used constantly for the testing of tornadoes, blizzards, tsunamis, and the strongest of lightning blasts. My order was quite firm that they could never land there, but they were to send forth all their mightiest storms there as a testing ground. The scientists of Cloudstay were quite overjoyed to be given this testing area. Apparently they'd been wanting to test a new form of weather that was caused by the splitting of hydrogen isotopes. They had yet to receive clearance from my sister due to their predictions of its destructive nature, but I gave it freely, as long as they kept the tests to that clearing. I do not know if these tests will kill the abomination of which you described, but I agree something had to be done. We can discuss this more when I come to visit tomorrow, my Twilight. Love always, Princess Luna.
Oh! I'll give that story 10 out of 10. I wanna print it. I'm gonna staple it so it's a book. And then I'm gonna hang it on my wall. And then I'm gonna read it every night before I go to bed. Every single night.
Every single night I'm gonna read it. For a month. I will read it every night. And then when I'm done with it, I'm going to have sex with it and throw it away.